Welcome to everyone that's here in person. Those that are on YouTube and on Facebook, I'm glad you're here. Be sure you subscribe, like, share. Didn't do so yet. We're going to continue our learning in Ein Yakov, which are stories from the Talmud and the Midrash. And today we learn the following: Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Brisa. Our sages taught us. Who wrote Megillas Tainis? Megillas Tainis was a compilation or a recording of all different unfortunate situations that happened to the Jewish people and the miracles that took us out of those problems. So there were challenges, difficulties, a lot of suffering, and then through various different miracles that transpired, we were saved. And our sages put this together in order to remind us and tell us that on these days you should not ever fast. It's like a holiday, and if a person has to fast for whatever reason, or if our sages need to establish a fast day, for example, if there's a drought in Israel, or other situations where one may institute a fast as a form of prayer, or in addition to, it's not tshuva, but it's in addition to tshuva, don't do it on those days, because those days are celebratory days, the days that we remember the miracles that Hashem did for us. But how could you remember all of them? So they compiled something known as Megillas Tainis. So who was it that actually wrote it? Who put it together? So Omru, our sages say it was Hananya v'Siyaseh. It was Hananya and his students, his help. They put it together. Why? They would love the tzares. Tzares usually means sufferings. Doesn't mean that here. It means the end of the story of the suffering. They would love to talk about and reminisce and relate the stories that happened, how it was difficult, and in the end, Hashem helped us. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Shimon ben Gamliel said, "You think it's unique to Hananya? We also love the tzares. We also love to talk about these situations where it used to be a problem and now it's solved, and now Hashem did a miracle and things are great. It's not unique to him. But what should we do?" He said, that if we're going to start writing it, we'll never finish. Just there's so much to write and so much to say, we won't manage to do it, because there's an infinite amount of days to be grateful to Hashem for miracles that He's done to our people. We won't be able to do it. Davar Acher, another opinion says, Ein Shaitan Nifka. There's an expression that says that a shaita, someone that's, let's just say, not the wisest person, is not offended, is not affected by it, because things happen to them, and then they get helped, but they're numb to these miracles that are going on. They're not affected by it. So you have to have a certain sensitivity to appreciate it and then to record it.
The sharpest
tool in the shed.
The sharpest pencil in the bunch.
Well, it's not about not being the sharpest. It's about sometimes you have to have a certain refinement or sensitivity to appreciate it and recognize it as a miracle. When things happen very often and it's constant, you just say, whatever. You don't care for it. Okay. Davar Acher, another opinion says, Ein psar hameis margish be'izmil. The flesh of a dead person doesn't feel the sharpness. It's a certain tool. They don't feel it because the person's dead. So even if there's a cut in the skin, they're not going to feel the poke. Now, this is an analogy to say that if the person is so removed or numb to miracles that are happening around them, then they don't notice it. So therefore, not anyone could just write down the stories, because you have to get it. You have to appreciate that it's actually a miracle. So I think Gemara says, 1 second, you're telling me that the flesh of a dead person does not feel the poke? Eini, that's not the case. We have a teaching from Rabbi Yitzchak. It says in Pirkei Avos, in Ethics of Our Fathers and Mishnayos, that after a person passes away, worms start to eat away at the person's body. Okay? Yeah. So if you're telling me that the body doesn't feel, it makes no difference if it's a poke or whatever, because the body's not alive, that's not true, because we have a clear teaching that it's as difficult, the pain of the worm eating away at the person's flesh, even after they pass away, is as bad as a needle in the flesh of a living person.
But the person is dead.
That's exactly the point of the teaching, that the body still feels it, and there's still a pain for the soul in that.
Yeah, it's quite
In a
Why
sense.
would the body still feel it if it's dead?
In a spiritual sense, there's a pain because the body is something holy. It's something which comes from Hashem. It's a gift. It's a deposit, and it's going through this pain. Because the pasuk says that in Eiv, the flesh does pain him even after the passing. So the Gemara answers that you could reconcile this by saying that is it true a worm that bites that eats away the body does feel it, but a needle it won't feel. Okay, so how do we get into this? Try to say that if you're too numb and you don't appreciate the miracles that are going on around you, the expression that we used is like a ismail, like this tool in the flesh of a dead body. Then we asked, 1 second, but you have worms and the body does feel it. We have a verse that talks about that to prove it. So we said worms, it does feel, but if they poke a needle, it does not feel.
So what's the good? Not everybody gets a needle.
Our point is to say that we need to be sensitive to good things that are happening in our lives and see it as a miracle. And Baruch Hashem, thankfully, we have a lot of things that go on around us, but there's so many of them that we just don't notice. We don't pay attention to them. We need to zone in on it, focus.
Did you think that pain is only in this world?
Amar Yehuda Amar Rav. That Yehuda said in the name of Rav, there's a particular person who is remembered for good, because he's done a very great thing, and his name is Hananya, the son of Chilkiah, or others call him the son of Chizkiah. What did he do that's so great? If not for him, then the book of Yecheskel, the prophet, the prophet Yecheskel, his book of prophecy would have been hidden, put away, and we wouldn't have access to it. Why? There are a lot of words there in verses that seem to contradict various parts of the Torah. We're not questioning it, but we were afraid that if we're going to allow access to anybody to read Sefer Yecheskel, then those that are heretics or trying to take people away from the Torah, they're going to use this to show contradictions. Now, what did this Hananya, the son of Chilkiah, do? He took 300 barrels of oil. Some say it's an expression, but he took a lot of oil, and he went up to the attic, a high place, I don't know if it's the top of a tower or the attic somewhere, and he started to explain all of these seemingly contradictions from Torah to Yecheskel. Now, Varshim tell us, commentaries explain that he took oil for two reasons. One is to light fire, so he should be able to read and see what he's doing. And number two is to be able to nourish himself. And it means not just oil, but food. He took the stuff with him. Why did he go to a high place? Because the higher a person is, the air is better, it's fresher. And it says that atmosphere, a little bit higher up, I don't know how many floors he went, but a little bit higher up is fresher air and cleaner, and the person is able to access a little bit more wisdom and realize different things and focus better when the air is fresh. So thanks to him, we didn't have to hide Sefer Yecheskel because he did explain all the contradictions, and we don't have to be worried about people taking it out of context because the answers are
Who is this?
readily available. His name was Hananya, the son of Chizkiah. Amar of Kanan. Of Kana said, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yesi, got sick. So they sent the messengers to him, and they said, before you pass away, tell us 2 or 3 things that you told us in the name of your father. Okay. In other words, you had teachings that you have a tradition from your father. Tell us a few of those teachings. Shalach lam. So he sent back a message. You want to know what my father told me? Kach amar Abba. The following is what my father said. Me'o shmeinim shana, 180 years before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, Pashta Machos Edom al Yisro, the kingdom of Edom has taken control over the Jewish people or over the land of Israel. Even though the Beis Hamikdash was not destroyed yet, but 180 years before they already took rule over them. Shmeinim Shana, when it was 80 years before the destruction, goes through Tumal Eretz Ha'amim. Our sages have established impure status for lands of the nations. And on glass. Up until that point, glass was not considered to be something which becomes tamei, and they have decreed, our sages decreed, that it is treated as impure. 40 years before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, again, we still had the temple, but Gol Sola Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin, the great Jewish court, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people, has been exiled. That means it went from the place of the Beis HaMikdash, it settled in Chanuyos, which is just outside the Beis HaMikdash, but it wasn't in the actual place that it normally was. And as a result of that, what's the difference? Who cares when the Sanhedrin was moved 40 years or not? How does it matter? So it does matter. Yitzchak told us the difference is they did not rule anything in regards to fines. Certain transgressions carry with them a fine or a penalty. And once they moved from their spot in the Beis HaMikdash, they did not rule anymore on these types of judgments. They didn't institute fines. Gemara says, you think that they stopped doing laws of fines? It's not a problem. They could do it when the Sanhedrin is not in its original place. Rather, they did take care of fines and they did rule on fines and institute fines, but death penalty is something which they did not do once they were moved from their original spot. It was still the 71 members of the Sanhedrin. They still held court, but that was something which is very drastic, obviously the death penalty. So it wasn't, they didn't issue these types of penalties once from 40 years before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And if you want to say in the 80 years it was there, they were there, they were doing it. The Sanhedrin was there. You can't say that because Vatanya, we looked at the Brisa that Hillel the Shimon, Gamliel the Shimon, the sage Hillel and Shimon, Gamliel and Shimon, they had their leadership 100 years before the destruction in the Beis HaMikdash. So because of that, this is consistent with what you're saying, that 80 years before they moved, because they wouldn't have been at the same time. I'm going to stop here for today. Thank you for joining, and tomorrow we'll continue.
Yeah. But you thought there's no filling down there.
What's that?
You thought after the